A lot of people think the telephone weighs about 400 tons. The telephone is just a device that connects to human beings. And to make a phone call there, they don't expect you to call, but there's no selling. I treat it as an opportunity to reach out to somebody, give them some information that might help them. So I learned that it's just a friend. Basically, you haven't established a friendship yet. The sale is lost in the planning of the sales call. It is not lost in the sales call. A lot of salespeople go into a sales call thinking, I'm just going to build that relationship, continue the relationship, and somehow weave in the products. Exceptional salespeople actually plan it out like a production. They do the effort beforehand, and they consider who are the key stakeholders they have to meet. What are some of the things that they'll be thinking of?
What would be the one or two pieces of advice you would give yourself?
I would say back yourself more.
Welcome to the CEO and the Salesman podcast. Darren, mate, I'm so looking forward to this conversation. We are kindred spirits in the sales world. And by the way, for anybody just tuning in, Darren Mitchell, top 20 sales influencer in Australia. Very excited to have you on the show. G'day, mate. How you going?
Thanks, Matthew. I'm really well, thank you. And great to speak to you, a fellow Aussie, although there's a lot of kilometres between us right now because you've moved to the States.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, so I'm here in Princeton, New Jersey. So when we spoke, actually, I looked back on our emails, and I was on your podcast March last year.
You were. So
it's been a year.
It has been, and you were still in Australia at that time. But over the journey that you've migrated from Australia to New Jersey, I haven't heard any of the hint of the New Jersey accent. Like you're not even saying Jersey.
Mate, we've got this. The first day we had this coffee lady. We found a coffee shop like within walking distance, and we had our dog with us. So Harvey flew on a different airplane. His ticket was way more expensive than mine. It's very disappointing. Hopefully they had like cold press and some cucumbers over his eyes because the money they spent on flying this dog over. Anyway, so I walk in. I've got the dog and. Terry and my older son had arrived a day beforehand, and across the road almost, she goes, "How you go?" Oh, no, she goes, "How did you get that dog here?" I'm like, "Oh, I love it. Would you want a coffee?" I'm like, "Oh, this is
a coffee.
I love it. A dog. Did you get the dog here?" She's such a lovely person, and we've become good friends, and I've got lots of good recommendations because her dad was a policeman in New York, and her grandfather was a policeman in New York. So Talk about New York heritage there.
Cool.
So you don't get more New York than that.
And they would have some pretty interesting stories, I would have thought.
Yeah, I have sat down and had a coffee with the dad, but he's a bit tight-lipped. I think he was, I need to get him on a couple of beers maybe or something like that.
So what happens on the beat pretty much stays on the beat.
I think so. I think so. Mate, I want to dive into it. So today, people aren't listening for us to sort of tune in. What I want to understand is I want to get your perspective on selling. People understand my perspective. I want to get your perspective. So where do you see? Look, you work with businesses, everything from the Fortune 500s, actually all the top 4 consulting firms in Australia, all the way through. What I want to understand is what lessons have you taken from being a telemarketer for Optus into today's sales environment?
Hey, you've gone right back. Man, that's like, and we're talking 1993, Matthew. 1993. Well, I was an engineer before that, and the building industry in Australia went belly up because we had the Prime Minister, Paul Keating, that we had to go through the recession that Australia had to have. So the building industry went bust. I was left with no real opportunities because the company I was working for went broke 4 or 5 times before I said, you know what, there's something else I should be doing. And Optus had just been awarded the second telecommunications license in Australia. And I had never even thought about jumping into anything other than construction. Because my whole philosophy was going to be, and my desire was, I was going to be a high-profile project manager on multi-story buildings in the CBD because that had prestige associated with it. And then I find myself working in a company in telemarketing, dialing small businesses and customers saying, "Hello, I'm from Optus." And they're saying, "Who? What?"
Love it.
So what I learnt is, well, first of all, I learnt to get over the fact that the telephone, and even today, a lot of people think the telephone weighs about 400 tons. The telephone is just a device, and it's a device in order to be able to connect to human beings. And to make a phone call there, they don't expect you to call, but there's no selling, because the first 3 months of my telemarketing career was, and when I say career, I did that for about 12 months and then moved on,
Right.
was simply building awareness. So it was an education process. So I treated it as that. I treated it as an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out to somebody and maybe give them some information that might help them either now or down the track about what they might be able to do for their telephone system at home, or their telephone, or didn't even have mobile phones at that stage. So I learnt that it's just a friend. Basically, you haven't established a friendship yet, and I'm just going to reach out and say g'day.
Fantastic. Mate,
did
I
that
love
mean
that.
that-
And just,
Still had people hang up on me though, but that's okay.
no doubt. Mate, I've made most of the money that I made in my businesses has been phone sales.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to say 95%
Yeah.
of my career has been phone sales, and the rest of it's obviously been face-to-face stuff and Zoom and stuff. But really, first 20 years was all phone selling, and the skill set. And what I noticed is the beginning back in the day, marketing would occur, and then sales would take over and do all the things.
Yeah.
Today, marketing is doing more and more and more. And what I'm seeing, and I'd like your perspective on this, is salespeople need to be better than they ever have been.
Yeah.
Because they get fewer and fewer chances to build that rapport, fewer and fewer chances to be really on point. So, so how do you take a person today who does feel like the phone weighs 400 tons, and how do you help them develop and build themselves as a salesperson?
It's a really interesting question, and I think part of the conversation needs to include the fact that customers today are more educated and have access to more information than they ever have. So back in the day, the role of a salesperson, particularly phone sales, would be, I've got to educate, I've got to try and build some sort of need, some sort of desire, and hopefully through the course of a conversation, turn them from curious to committed. All right. And you would have had KPIs. You've got to be on the phone for a certain amount of time, and then just get to the user script and get it done. I think a lot of it, though, is the perception that salespeople might have in terms of the pressure either implied directly from their sales manager or maybe self-imposed, that I've got to try to sell every single person I'm speaking with. And what I've found is the people who can actually treat the conversation on a phone as we're building a connection, building a friendship to some degree. If I can do that as my core purpose, because I don't want to come across as pushy or salesy. And a lot of people still use cold calls, and cold calls still work, but it's not about necessarily selling on the first call. It's about how do I build some awareness to the point where that might lead to another call, and therefore a discovery qualification call, and then a turnover in terms of a conversion. So I say to people now on the phone, it's only a piece of plastic. It's a piece of plastic. Would you, if you saw somebody in a coffee shop that you had an inkling or a feeling that I want to go and introduce myself, would you go and do that and say, "Hi, I'm Darren"? All right. And when you do that, what do most people do when you see them face to face? Most people will actually extend their hand and say, "Hi, I'm Matthew." All right. It's just a normal human thing. The only difference is you can't see the person down the other end of the phone. You don't know what's happening with that person in that particular moment or the moments before the phone rings. And you have no control over how they're going to respond to you. So what I've seen is a lot of people get so caught up in all the permutations and combinations of what could happen and just forget the fact that there's a human being on the other end of the phone, and my entire objective is just to say g'day and make a connection. And if we can actually get some sort of momentum and a key connection between us, then it may lead to another call. It may lead to another opportunity. And if it doesn't, guess what? I've learned something. So how can I take what my lesson is into the next call, into the next call, into the next call? So there's no substitute for the repetition. You just got to do it.
Yep.
And if you have any trepidation around how big the phone weighs or what the people are going to say or not say, you just got to get over it. Because the other thing I say to salespeople all the time, it's actually not about you. They don't care about that. If you go into a call understanding that probably 9 out of 10 people have no interest in what you're about to talk to them about, then you know that the outcome is probably going to be they're going to say no thanks, bugger off, or not interested, slam the phone, or whatever the case might be. So you know that. So what have you got to lose? Treat it as a game.
Love that. So thinking about going, sort of cycling up to the management level, and just take me through a situation where you've trained lots of sales leaders. Can you give me a moment where somebody's completely unraveled when they've been promoted from sales contributor, like an individual contributor, to a sales manager? Because that seems to be the natural thing that businesses do. I did it myself. My best salesperson to promote them to the sales manager. And so where have you seen that happen, and what's the thinking there, and how do we overcome that? How do we fix that?
In terms of the bad examples?
Well,
which
let's start.
Majority are.
So which majority are. Actually, let's talk, because I know what I'm talking about and you know what I'm talking about, but for the listeners, so why do individual contributors fall apart? And can you give me an example of one where actually really all fell to bits for them?
So I'll start by saying that for some reason, particularly in big corporates, the gate for an individual contributor to move into sales leadership has to be, A, they have to have high potential, and B, they've got to be a high performer. That's almost like the prerequisite. No consideration as to whether they're a good human being, they can build connections, they can listen and a good communicator. Forget that. They've got to be a really good salesperson. So that's the first thing. And a lot of salespeople are not necessarily moving into a sales leadership because they want to. They're moving into a sales leadership role because the company is saying, well, Matthew, you're a top performer. We're going to promote you into a sales leadership role because if we can get your team to replicate what you do, this company will be absolutely going to explode. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to give you the transition plan. We're not going to give you any training on things like emotional intelligence, how to actually have a good conversation, how to actually get out of the way and not be the super salesperson. We're going to just give you the keys to the office, the great car spot, maybe the office with the real plant, not the rubber plant, and good luck, my friend. Good luck.
Yep.
And so the vast majority either fail or flounder in the first, say, 3 months. And the reason for that in the majority of cases is the salesperson has been so used to being the hunter, doing all the strategy, getting all the accolades, running the business case, getting the deal, doing all the stuff. And they move into a sales leadership role where their role needs to be almost like the conductor, the supporter, the coach, the mentor, and not the super salesperson. So I don't think majority of them do it out of spite. They just do it out of habit because they're used to doing the things they were doing as an individual contributor. So they think, now that I'm a leader, I'm now responsible for my team. So I've got to be involved in the discovery calls. I've got to be involved in the negotiation. I've got to be involved in the closing sequences of the conversion calls and stuff like that. So in that process, they disintermediate, in many cases, their sales team and treat the customer and teach the customer that if you want anything done, come to me because I am the sales leader, right? So they don't build a team of independent thinking salespeople. They end up building a team of codependent salespeople where the team is dependent on them to run the strategy, get involved, and they wonder why they're trying to burn the candle at both ends. So, and I've seen it happen many, many times. A great salesperson gets into the sales leadership role. The company thinks this person is going to just continue on the trajectory of superstardom. And two things happen. One, they start to flounder because they don't know how to have conversations and don't know how to lead, right? Because the skill set is completely different to being an individual contributor. And the company starts to see a dip in sales because they've lost their key salesperson because they've promoted into a sales leader. So there's this big hole. And sometimes the sales leader says, you know what, this is not for me. I don't need the pressure. All of a sudden, I'm spending more time upward managing, sitting in strategy meetings, forecast meetings, and all the stuff that I'm expected to do now, less time on the tools, out in front of customers, helping my team. I might as well just be an individual contributor because at least I'm in control of my own destiny. I don't need this stuff, right? And it happens time and time again. And that's why a lot of people get burnt and they go back to being a individual contributor. And I put it down to the fact that the people that are promoting these sales individual contributors haven't thought specifically enough about what do they need and what do they want in a sales leader. So what does a good sales leader look like in our business? I don't want a
So
stupid
let's
salesperson.
talk about that.
Yeah.
What are the 2 or 3 things that you look for to find a quality sales leader?
I look for humility. I look for contribution, service mindset. So I'm very big on this concept of leadership as a service or servant leadership, and that is as a leader, my job is to create an environment that my sales team can actually excel, which means I need to treat them as A, adults, and B, as independent thinking humans. So I'm not going to do things for them, but I've got to maybe create some opportunities to remove barriers to make it easier for them to sell. But I'm not going to be the super salesperson. So I need to learn when to get out of the way. I also
very
want
difficult for
Well-
it's very difficult for most people to. My own example is I built the second floor, got myself a corner office, and was bored, and so I went back down into the sales room and picked up and got a tiny little desk in the corner and started competing with my sales room.
That's
I
it.
started working for my sales manager.
Yeah.
And that was the best days of my life. Best
Yeah.
time I ever had.
Yeah.
Because
And-
I'm not a great. I never identified as a good sales manager, so I'm enjoying this stuff. So carry on, mate.
And so I think the biggest characteristic is, does this person have a desire to want to lead salespeople? Because it's not for everybody. And when I say that desire, it's you need to learn how to get out of the way, and maybe, just maybe, your salespeople may end up earning more and making more money than you. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, and so this is the thing that is really interesting. So the problem with that, I guess, is somebody has to have some self-awareness, is because their career path is sales manager, sales director, owner of a company, yacht occupier, so, so the next step is sales manager. And so how does a person build that self-awareness around themselves? Because, salespeople, they see the next job up. Well,
Yep.
If I'm contributing to his salary because he gets overriders, then how do I get a piece of that action?
Yeah, it is. And it comes down to, and I do a lot of mentoring for people who are moving from an individual contributor into a sales leadership role. And one of the first questions I ask them is, why do you want to be a sales leader? What is it about sales
How often do they
leadership?
say, I just want to make more money. I'm here to, I joined sales to make money, and I'm going to make more money being a manager.
And unfortunately, Matt, this perception is, as a sales leader, the higher you go up in the ranks of sales leadership, the more money you make. Or the top line, that might appear to be the case, but then if you break it down into a per hour rate, your salespeople are probably making more than you are per hour, right? So I want to try to dispel the myth that just because you're a sales leader doesn't necessarily mean you're making more than your team, right? So why do you want to be a sales leader? And it can't, and I say this respectfully, it can't be about the money. In fact, I say to salespeople, you can't, if you're motivated by money, and interesting, a lot of research suggests that a lot of salespeople, it's in the top 10, but it's not the number one thing that motivates people. If money becomes the driver, then that greed can transfer into energy that you actually start to impact your customers. So, but as a sales leader, why do you want to be a sales leader? What is it about sales leadership that really rocks your boat? And often what I hear is, I want to be able to teach, I want to be able to mentor, I want to be able to create a legacy, I want to make sure that this business is sustainably successful, which is all well and good, it's altruistic, but think about this, it's the impact you can have on people that 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the track, they are going to be better sales leaders for having you as their sales leader today. So it can't be about you winning the deal. It can't be about you getting all the accolades. You've got to learn to get out of the way and be in the background, because really great and what I call exceptional sales leaders, most don't even know who they are. But the people who matter are saying, hey, that sales leader was the catalyst for me being as successful as I am today. And if it wasn't for that person, I would never have achieved what I've achieved. That is what what I think sales leadership is all about. It's not about standing on stage in front of 1,000 people and getting the number one sales leader in the company award or the president's club. It's not about that. It's the day-to-day things that you do that enable people to be their best.
Yeah, I love it. So are there any frameworks, or I know being a coach and a mentor for so many years, I bet you've got frameworks forever. So is there one or two particular frameworks you think the listeners today would get some value out of understanding how how to think about sales and sales leadership?
I kind of use a hybrid of a lot of different things, but I try to keep it really, really simple. And I wouldn't necessarily call it a framework per se, but it's more of preparation. And that is, I reflect on my own, I guess, journey and career. I spent 2 years before I was a sales leader preparing to be a sales leader. So I'm not sure I'd call that a framework, but I'd call that preparation, or almost like a, what do I call it? An
apprenticeship or something.
An apprenticeship. Thank you. Yeah. And I had great sales leaders around me that I could learn from, but I also had some not so great sales leaders that I could learn from as well in terms of what not to do. So I'd spent 2 years looking at literally every conversation I had, every proposal, every meeting, every pitch, every email to some degree, and I would do it through the eyes of how would a sales manager either do this or reflect on this. So I'm very big on, and people use the law of attraction, all that sort of stuff. I use act as if. No, not fake it till you make it, but act as if. So I was acting for 2 years as if I was a sales manager. What that did for me, Matt, is prepared me for at least the thinking side of sales leadership. For when I got the actual role, I'd actually practiced for 2 years and seen many different situations. So I felt confident in myself that whatever was thrown at me as a sales manager, I had seen it or experienced it to some degree before. Now, it still didn't prepare me for everything, but it gave me a great grounding that I had the level of confidence that I could hold myself in that role, knowing that I'd done the work. And it's like the person who is practicing to perform, they do the work. You just don't get up on stage and do a keynote address, and that's the first time you do it. You've done it hundreds, if not thousands of times beforehand. So from a framework point of view, it was exploration. It was revision. It was a level of curiosity. I was always asking questions. I actually had a mentor for 2 years before I became a sales leader.
Wow.
And that mentor was a sales director in the company that I was working in. And he saw something in me, but I asked him to be a mentor. So we would meet every 2 weeks, and I would just pump him full of questions because he was connected to senior executives that I had never had access to. So I was able to ask him heaps of questions and get how he thought. But the biggest thing around the whole framework stuff is I wanted to not just get good at the doing of the sales leadership role. I wanted to get really good at the thinking around the sales leadership role. So how does a sales leader think? And those 2 years were critical for me to have that confidence. So when I got the role, I'd already been thinking for 2 years about how a sales leader should act, how a sales leader does act, and I had great examples and not so great examples to do that. Having said that, the first 90 days, it still nearly killed me because despite my best effort, and despite all that work, I inadvertently had created an environment where my team were wholly and solely dependent on me, and I was solely and wholly dependent on them. So I developed this codependent relationship, which thankfully I was able to unravel after about 90 days.
Right. So how do you start a sales training conversation? Let's say the business has been running, it's got some sales, it's got some activity. So I can just imagine going in and saying, okay, everybody, now we're going to do sales properly. That's probably going to put everybody off. So how do you start that sales conversation? How do you position that in the person's mind so they are receptive and interested in what you're about to say?
So we teach a lot about feedback, and I do not use the feedback sandwich because it's the SH1T sandwich, really. But when I work with sales leaders, I'm always saying, and sales teams, I'm always saying, when you reflect first and foremost on what is working well. So I never go into an organization and say, hey, I noticed that this is not working. That's stuffed. It's shocking. You need to change it. You start with, what's working well? What are some of the things that you're achieving? What are some of the goals that you're hitting? What are you doing really well? What's working? Because if any senior sales executive, senior vice president of sales chief revenue officer, if they're worth their salt, they know that they're not perfect yet. They're always on a journey, and there's always areas that they can improve. But I don't come in and work with an organization that is completely stuffed that I don't know what the hell they're doing. You come in and say, things are going really well, but we feel as if there's some more potential that we need to be able to extract that we're not realizing yet. So it starts with, what are you doing really well? And why do you think that is? What do you have a really good idea about your ideal customer? And are you seeing your ideal customer not just coming to you, being attracted to you, but are they coming back over and over and over again? Because sometimes organizations don't know. They think, and I ask the question, what are you doing really well? And they say, well, we're getting our sales number, and that's all they point to. We're hitting our target, so therefore we must be doing well. But what's happening to the quality of your customer conversations? How well do you know whether your sales team are actually qualifying customers well enough? Are your telemarketers, or are your SDRs, or are your account managers, are they having human-based, interest-based conversations with your customers, or are they going in for the sell too early? Are they talking about your product? Are they talking about your service? Or are they educating? Are they building genuine relationships that are planting seeds? So it's all positioning about what's doing well. And often there's a question that says, well, if you could improve your business by X%, what would that look like? Or what analysis have you done so far that if you could extract another 5-10% of productivity or sales effort out of your team, what would that look like? What have you been thinking about doing? What have you tried or hasn't worked?
And you'd have that conversation with the salespeople. You'd say, what would 10% more effectiveness look like? So just sort of, what I want to do is from this conversation get some free consulting. No, I want to say, so just I've got a job coming up and I need some help. No, so what I'm trying to do is give the listeners something really practical that if they do feel that they could be doing a better job. Yes, pipelines, like getting leads is a function of math and creativity, and marketing companies can do that. But then it's the part in which the salespeople need to admit that they could be better, find a way that they can self-identify, be self-aware a little bit, and then develop that through. So what I'm trying to understand here is, you walk into a room, you've started to have a conversation about what's working well, what could be done better. So how do you then create that bridge between how good they are and how they could learn more from you?
I think you hit it on the head, Matt, is the self-awareness part. And a lot of sales people that will overinflate A, their pipeline, and B, the quality of that pipeline. So the first thing I try to do is find out what they're doing really well and not embellish that, not make it up any bigger than it actually is, but also ask the definite question is, if you were a forensic scientist, or if you were sitting in a courtroom and you were asked under oath the quality of this pipeline, the quality of the opportunities, would you rate them how you rated them in the CRM right now, or as you've just talked about? And I want to have that honest conversation, because until you can do that, and until you can recognize, we're not where we thought we were going to be, or we're not where we think we could be, then only then are they going to be open to perhaps learning something new that might help them bridge that gap. Because if they think, and I've seen this happen, I've done it myself. We make the sales opportunities sound a lot bigger than they actually are, because it's this competition. So, hey, I've got to make sure that I give the impression that I know what I'm doing. Underneath, I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to close this? Because I've got only 2 months left, and there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. But how do I have that conversation? We want to be able to strip that back and say, hey, it's okay. It's okay to not have a healthy pipeline. What's not okay is to have that healthy pipeline continue over the next 3 to 6 months, because at the end of it, the scoreboard is going to show that perhaps you were telling some porky pies. So, yes, you're doing well, but also B, let's have a really good hard look at the veracity of my pipeline and my customer base, and where are we actually at? Where are my gaps?
Got it.
And then if I'm open to learning, there might be some, and this is not about changing the whole thing. It might be changing one thing. It might be the way that I actually start a conversation. It might be for many salespeople. In fact, I say this with a bit of authority. For many salespeople, the sale is lost in the planning of the sales call. It is not lost in the sales call, because they haven't planned.
Talk to me more about that. What do you mean?
Well, a lot of salespeople go into a sales call thinking, you know what, I've got a good relationship. I'm just going to build that relationship, continue the relationship, and somehow weave in the products, and we'll hope for a sale, right? Exceptional salespeople actually plan it out like a production. They do the effort beforehand, and they consider who are the key stakeholders they have to meet. What are some of the things that they'll be thinking of? What is that I, as a salesperson, want my customer to think, to feel, and to do? Simple. 3 things, right? When I'm with my customer, what do I want them to think? Now, it might be that I want them to think that we are the only viable alternative to solve their particular problem. Whatever it is, right? You want them to think on the intellectual plane. But until they feel something on the emotional plane, they're not going to be moved to action. So I've got to think about, with this meeting coming up, with this conversation, what is it that I want them to feel? Now, it's not feeling about me. How do I want them to feel about the whole issue they've got to solve, or the problem they want to solve, but also the solution that I might put in place to help them solve it? I want them to feel that they are making a good decision if they move forward with me and with us, that they'll be in safe hands.
And so with feeling, we'll get on to doing in a minute, but with feeling, is it about having a consequence conversation? It's is that the sort of thing? Is it a carrot and stick where we go, well, if you don't have them explain back to you, if they don't take action, there's going to be issues? I mean, how do you frame that feeling?
So part of that, it may well be that, because if you've done your research, and if you're a challenger brand, for example, and you're trying to displace an incumbent within the organization, what is going to be impetus for them to want to change, right? Cost of change, all that sort of stuff. It's easy to just stay where we are, and we'll just keep the incumbents honest. We'll just get maybe a price reduction, and it's all good. Yep. What is going to be the catalyst for them to want to move? So I've got to try and create this feeling, and it could be, as you said, consequences. So what are you going to feel? What are you going to achieve when you actually move? So how are you going to feel? How is this going to position you? What sort of profile are you going to have now in the organization if you are the one who has actually helped this move across to us, and you've now got the better solution, and it solved a lot of your problems? We've also got to consider the opposite to that. So what if you don't do this? What are the consequences if you don't move forward? What are the things if you don't solve this problem? What are some of the things that are going to be having to be grappled with? What are some of the things that might rear its ugly head down the track if you don't go forward and take this sort of action? So it's not always on, because many people make decisions based on avoiding stuff, not necessarily moving to pleasure. So often you'll have to build some pain, but not too much to the point where the whole world's going to implode if they don't do it.
They're sobbing into their team's meeting. Yeah.
Yes. But because what you want to do is you on the mental plane, you want them to think, hey, okay, this is a logical decision, and I can see the numbers and it all makes sense. But on the emotional plane, unless they're emotionally attached to want to do something because they'll get the outcome, which is the logical outcome, they're not going to do anything unless there's a big reason for them to move. So I've got to be able to create that feeling.
Got it. And then the third part, you said think, feel, and do. So when you say do, what do you mean by that?
Do is, what do I, as the salesperson, want my customer to do? Now, it could be, I want them to say yes to our proposal. I want them to say yes to themselves to make the decision that they know is going to benefit them and their business. Or it might be, depending on the strategic nature of the deal or the complexity, it might be I want them to agree to a follow-up meeting, to a next meeting, to meet my VP of sales, to meet my head of engineering, whatever the next step is. I have to have a call to action. So I say to sales teams all the time, if you're having a sales meeting with a customer, then there may or may not be an opportunity to close a sale on that call. But if you understand the research, and I think the recent Gartner research picked this up, and it's confirmed from many, many other pieces of research from years ago, that 80% of the sales are made between 5 and 12 contact points with a customer. All right. So if that happens, then I've got to keep thinking about, I'm not going to necessarily, unless I'm catching lightning in a bottle, I'm not going to be making a sale on the first interaction. I've got to start to build. So what's my next call to action? What is the next thing I want the customer to do that I'm leading them down to, hopefully, an educated buying decision? And the psychology behind that is, as a salesperson, I've got to consider myself, and this doesn't come from me, it comes from a guy called St. John Craner out of New Zealand. He says, you need to become a buyer's assistant. And that is, you're going to assist your buyer to make an educated purchasing decision and lead them down the path of those decision steps so that they feel comfortable that they've made the right decision that's going to solve the problem. And you just happen
Darren,
to be
I
the
absolutely
conductor
love
of the process.
Mate, I love that. Like, so many thoughts have come up in my mind as you've been talking, and of course, it needs to be all about me. So, no, I'm trying. It's desperately hard. No, I'm joking. So, but what I did like about that is, first of all, it's so true. It's the 5 to 12. It's even longer for the bigger the deal, the more conversation you need to have. The over indexing on the yes is I'm sort of playing back to you the stuff I've heard. The over indexing on the yes is, whilst that might be the outcome, but for the customer, it's really, the yes is like base camp.
Yeah.
Because the outcome is what they're trying to achieve is the result of using your software, your service, your whatever. So they're not really thinking about the purchase; they're thinking about the outcome. So I've been talking to salespeople about, well, how do we talk through the sale, not to the sale. If we talk to the sale, then really there's this drop off, this cliff edge where they've bought it, and it's high fives and champagne pops.
That's it. And you bring up a really interesting point, Matt, and that is, and I'm going to use my terminology, which is I think what you're saying is the sale actually doesn't begin until after the sale is made. So when you're talking about selling through the sale or conversation through the sale, it's a lot of customers want to know, well, are you going to court me until we've done the deal, and therefore you're just going to leave me and go on to somebody else, or are you still going to be around after we do the transaction? Because if you think about, and particularly in B2B, we should be thinking about life cycle management and thinking, okay, if I've got the opportunity now, particularly if you're breaking into some incumbency and getting an opportunity, it's well within your remit to think, well, I want this to be a much longer, much bigger opportunity. So once the sale's made, I better make sure that I'm doubling down on all the promises that I've made, but I still have to be even more visible, because now is when the work starts. Because they're going to be thinking, you're going to leave me and go on to the next opportunity. I have to be, despite what my organization has in terms of a structure, I'm responsible for this account. So I'm going to make sure I do everything possible to now prove to them that the trust that I wanted from them is now proven based on the actions that I'm taking.
Love that. The other thing you said I thought was really great was being a deal guide or a sales guide. And in relation to that, because and how I've been thinking about that recently is that whilst you might have sold 10 of these this year, the customers probably bought 0 of these this year. Certainly in large B2B and corporate sales, and certainly in large government ones, they might have never bought one of these. They might have started that role 5-10 years ago and never bought whatever you're selling, so they don't know how to buy it. Yeah. And so it's so important for a salesperson to recognize there's a disconnect between what you know about how a person buys and how a person actually buys.
That's it.
Yeah, so I really like that framing there of guidance.
It is, and that's why I love that terminology, the guide or the buyer's assistant, because if you recognize that for many people who are buying, it might be the first time they've done it, right? And they don't know what they don't know. So we want to be seen as the trusted advisor, the expert, but we also don't want to be seen as the person that's just flogging a product, right?
Yep.
So often the most effective salespeople are the ones that can actually have a conversation with a customer and say, you know what, based on what you're telling me, based on the investigation that I've done, I don't think this particular product and this particular solution is the right fit for you. So I'm going to suggest that we don't go forward and you don't purchase this, right? Just imagine what that does to the credibility of not just you as an individual, but to the company when you can say, I don't think this solution is the right fit for you, and here's why. I've seen it happen that customers turn around and said, no, I think it is right, and this is why. They try to convince you as to why it's the right solution.
That's great. That's funny. So a couple of things in my mind. I'm a big scripts guy, but I know that a lot of people don't like scripts. So what are your thoughts on, and I might have just sort of shown my hand there, but what are your thoughts on sales scripts?
I think sales scripts are great from a structural point of view. I don't think they're great from a rote learning point of view. And the reason I say that is I do a lot of training around pitching, presenting, so presentation skills, for example. And I often use the analogy of, you're watching an A-grade movie with an A-grade actor, blockbuster, right? When you watch a movie, an A-grade movie, say Thor, right? The character that plays Thor, which is
Chris Hemsworth,
right? You don't look at him watching that movie as Chris Hemsworth. You look at him as his Thor. He is in character, right? You watch a B-grade movie, and it sounds like the B-grade actor in the B-grade movie is actually reciting lines. So they've learnt the lines, they're saying the lines, but there's something missing, right? The A-grade actors become the character. So from a scripting point of view, I think it's phenomenal in terms of guideposts. I think it's phenomenal in terms of a structure of a call. What I don't want to see is people just reciting lines, because that sounds like you're scripted. So if you know your content so well, then you should be able to have a conversation and know what the signals are and know what, okay, if they say this, I've got to go off here. This is the concept of what I've got to get to. But my language that I'm going to use is going to be my language, but it's following a concept, or it's following a guiding set of principles. So I'm a big proponent of scripting, but I'm not a big proponent of you have to read it word for word, because the words are not the things that are going to convince or influence the customer. It's who you are and who you become and how you make that customer feel a certain thing that is going to be the most important element.
Brilliant. Love that. Fully on board with that. So, and so I think about it as if you're sailing by the stars, sort of where you want to go, how you tack, how you move, how you deal with each individual objection or whatever it might be where the customer throws at you. You understand that. And the thing that I found with scripting is that if you know it really well, then you don't need to reference it.
No.
And so the structure, the framework that you're operating within. It's the times in which salespeople find themselves 25 minutes into some type of monologue about their dog. They go, oh no. They've wandered way off the reservation, and they can't, and they need to, and then it's quite jarring for the customer to go, but anyway, about our government SaaS solution, so there needs to be some type of balance there, right?
Well, it does, and that's why I always come back to the pre-call planning, right? So if you do a lot of the planning, and if you think back to what we just talked about in terms of the think, the feel, the do, right? If you have those three things you've given a lot of consideration to, and you know what the guideposts are, you know what time is you've got allocated, and you want to have a rough estimate in terms of, okay, there'll be a bit of a prelude, bit of small talk, then we want to get into it. You follow the flow chart, but be open and flexible to what's going to be presented in front of you. So I often say to teams that, like using their golf analogy, you play the ball where it lies. That is, You can do so much planning, and there might be something that happens in a sales call that you haven't actually planned for. But if you have some guiding principles, not following a script to its nth degree based on what to say, then you can handle anything. And that gives you a level of confidence. And then what that does, it actually exudes some energy to the customer and gives them a sense of surety that this person knows what they're doing. And I've tried to push them off track, but they've handled it with grace and they've moved on anyway. So hasn't been affected.
Perfect. Love that. So, mate, I want to hit you with a couple of questions, so just as we wrap up here, I just got a couple of short ones I want to hit you with, because I want to make sure that people are starting to embed this stuff and realize that sales is not a dirty word, and sales is something that needs to be developed as a skill. Because being here in America, what I've seen is incredibly successful organizations who are really have got sales down to a fine art. And I think that the businesses who don't feel that they need good selling, or they go, well, my product's just going to do it, I think they're really missing out on a significant amount of opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you some quick rapid fire ones. So
sure.
What's the one thing, or one or two things? See, you've heard me say what's one or two things, what's the three or four things, and that's that's something that I've baked deep into my brain as a salesperson. Because if you ever ask somebody what's the one thing, that puts too much pressure on the one thing, right? And typically the second or third answer is the truth.
Correct.
So because how are you going this morning? Yeah, good. How are you really going? Actually, I'm 50 and my back hurts. So what are the two or three things you see sales leaders that keep doing that's slowly killing their team's performance?
One is a overemphasis on pipeline forecasting, compliance, CRM stuff. So I see sales leaders getting too involved in sales development and not knowing what their role is. And I see sales leaders doing next to no, and this is a gross generalization because I'm sure there's organizations doing it well. I see a lot of sales leaders not coaching their sales teams. Now, sales coaching happens to be the number one driver of high performance within a high performing sales team. And yet it's the first thing that's either rescheduled or cancelled. Probably because the sales leader doesn't know how to coach that team.
Well, then, mate, I got to ask if that's the most important thing, and we've completely, we've buried the lead 40 minutes into the episode. So, what? I've done a great job of interviewing you. So, what are the 2 or 3 things that I think if I'm going to open a sales coaching conversation, how do I have a sales coaching conversation? Maybe I'm not a great sales leader, which actually I'm not. I'm a good individual contributor. I'm not a great sales leader. So, if I was to go to my people, how do I start that conversation?
It's by asking questions. And it could start as simple as, and this is, you've got to be really careful how you frame the question, of course. Like you just come out of a sales call.
Why do you suck?
Yeah, why do you suck? And you don't say, so Matt, how do you think that call went?
How do you think that call went?
Yeah.
Have you lost the script somewhere?
I think it comes over time. And I don't think, because there's a lot of salespeople who they say they're open to coaching, but most sales, and this is again a gross generalization, a lot of sales leaders don't know how to coach because they think the coaching is directing or telling them, right? A good coach is great at asking questions and getting the person to self-identify and self-reflect and maybe ask some questions to then guide them into an area where they can improve. And the sales leader also has to remember, I'm not coaching the person on closing the deal. I'm coaching the person on how to improve their approach, their aptitude, their attitude, their structure that will help them be more self-sufficient. I'm not there to tell them how to do it.
What are your favorite questions to ask? What are your favorite? Do you have a list in your head?
Well, I always start. I don't go to sales calls a lot because I don't have a sales team, right? Because I'm an individual independent contractor. But when I was running sales teams, we'd come out of a call, and the first thing I'd ask the salesperson is, "That was a really interesting. I like the way we did this. Can I get you to think about what were the 1 or 2 key things that you were really happy with? How did that and frame it in a positive sense? Because I want to always start with a positive, because as human beings, we're always tilted to the negative. So I'm not going to ask, so how do you think that went? Right? Because that has an undertone of, oh shit, something's coming. So when you look at that, what were the 1 or 2 things that you were happy with, how that call went? What were the 2 or 3 quotes or the 2 or 3 questions that you're really happy that you asked, that you got a great response? So if I start with a positive, then, and this is not buttering the person up to ready to just hammer them with the negative stuff.
It's not a crap sandwich.
It's not the crap sandwich. It's actually teaching them, because we have to learn how to be positive. So if we have a growth mindset, you've got to start with, okay, you may have felt that call wasn't great because we didn't get the sale or we didn't get the call to action we thought. But what were some of the good things that happened in that meeting anyway? So always start with the positive. So I'll always frame the question on what worked well. Once I've done that, I say, okay, on reflection, what didn't work as well that you hoped would? And then we'll get into a conversation, and it might be, depending on the individual, it might be the last time, is it okay if I gave you some feedback? Is it okay if I can give you some ideas to think about for the next time that we can work through, so that we're prepared for the next time we have a similar conversation or a similar situation as to this? And if you do that, and if the person understands and knows that you're there to serve them, to help them develop, then they're going to be more open to it. Versus, hey, Matt, how do you think that call went? Because just the tonality of that, you think, oh, shit, something's coming. Oh, and I'm going to turn it around and say, well, I think it went okay, but yeah, let's talk about the but.
Let's talk about that.
I think
I might have told you this. I think I might have told you the story of how I realized I wasn't a good sales manager is I was, I think I may have mentioned it, but I'll tell you for anybody listening. So I was in the sales room. I was listening to a new rep selling. Actually, they weren't that new. They were probably 6 months in. So they're relatively, should be good. And I could just see them drifting and I could hear them drifting. And of course, it's starting to bug me. It's bugged me over the course of a couple of days, how it's bugging me. And I just wanted to catch it. And they were in the middle of a pitch and it was complete garbage. And I walked over and I hung up the phone in the middle of the pitch and said, Simon, that was complete dog shit. Get the script out of the drawer, call them back and apologize. You don't know how you got disconnected and actually do your fucking job. And I lifted my finger and I walked out and went, geez, I'm not very good at this job. And maybe it's funnily enough, he was an excellent. No, I didn't say that was the moment he turned himself around, but it was. I don't have because I'd built up this energy of the last 4 or 5 have been terrible.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
And so I built a head of steam, and then I came in at level 10. I probably should have come in at level 2 and asked a better question.
The velvet sledgehammer, eh?
Yeah, that's right. It was. Yeah, that's
right. But I mean, that goes to show you've got a huge amount of awareness that that probably wasn't the best approach, or maybe he was the type of person that could handle that sort of direct feedback.
I was lucky enough that my whole room, 6 guys and 1 girl, and they were all absolute murderers.
Yeah,
they're ex-timeshare guys and girls, absolute skins as thick as a rhino's butt. They were absolutely bulletproof, and they were just a great team of people. I was lucky to have built a team of people who were able just to grind it out and do the work, and they all made extraordinary amounts of money.
Yeah, good.
Those guys.
Good.
Anyway,
yeah.
So I want to ask, so where do founders get it catastrophically wrong when they go to hire their first sales leader?
Well, I'm big into profiling, right? So whether it be disc profiling, or I use one called Reach. And I know this to be true because I've been in this boat for many years. We're very good at liaising with being attracted by people who remind us of ourselves, right? So
sure.
we go and find people. We think, wow, this person is awesome. We're getting on like a house on fire. It's just an effortless conversation. I think this would be a great hire. Where founders get it wrong is they think, well, because we're similar, you're going to fall into line with what we're doing. You're going to be on board because you're going to understand the concepts of the products and you're going to be able to sell the way I do. Founders and sales leaders need to understand that you've got certain characteristics within your team. You as an individual have certain characteristics, but you've also got blind spots. So you've got to think very carefully about what are the characteristics in an ideal salesperson that I need to take this company forward, to take this team forward, that I currently do not have in my team. And you've now got to go and search for that, which may well mean that you'll find somebody who is the complete opposite to you in terms of personal style, but that's exactly the type of person that you need if you give it some thought in terms of the characteristics that you need. Because this is about sustainable. It's about diversity of thought. It's about having this organization that has a chance to be sustainably successful. The other mistake that a lot of founders make is they think, well, nobody is going to be as good as me selling my product, my service, because I've created it, right? So I am the super salesperson. So they try to bring people into their organization and they set up them to fail because they're not selling as quickly or as much as the founder does, because the founder, this is their baby, right?
Yep.
So they've also got to have some frameworks in place or some principles in place about what the expectations are and give them time. That's where the characteristics become absolutely critical. So don't try to replicate yourself. Don't try to get a mini me. Get somebody who you think will complement what we have, and don't think it. So if you're a one-man person and you need to bring in a salesperson, that's great. Bring somebody who's in many cases the direct opposite to you. But also think about, if I need to expand and turn 1 into 3, into 5, into 10, how do I start to expand that with science and with psychology to say, I need to have people who are really detailed. I need to have people who are really driven. I need to have people who are great at building relationships. And I need to have people who are quite ambitious in terms of pioneering and creative. So if I have those 4 in place, I've got a really good diverse group of people that if I, as the conductor, can get them all on the same page, then I give the organization a really good chance of being successful, because they're going to be talking to customers that, guess what, love detail, don't love detail, are entrepreneurial, just want shit done, etc. So if you've got the one type of person trying to talk to all these different people, then unless they've got the chameleon effect where they can actually change the way they communicate based on the customer, then they're going to be very, very one-dimensional.
Mate, I love that. You've used this term a few times, the conductor, and I like the visual of the thinking of that. You know, a person as a sales, as individual contributor, they're the lead singer of the band, and they're facing the crowd, whereas the conductor turns their back on the crowd, and they're now facing the orchestra. So I really like that visual where they actually are, you're facing your team, and now you're enabling and empowering them to be more successful, to be more in tune, to be more capable. So I really like that, the way you've put that. So,
thank you.
So if you think back to your younger days and Optus and everybody in between, what would be the 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would give yourself if you were able to go back in time, see Darren Mitchell at 25 and go, this is the couple of bits I'd say to him about your sales career?
I would say back yourself more. Despite the mentoring, despite the, I guess, people I surround myself with, there was always this seed of doubt to say, well, am I truly capable? Who am I to come into an organization like this? I'm an engineer, for Christ's sake, right? I'm not a born salesperson. I hate sales. I don't like being rejected either. I want to be liked. But I would say to myself, hey, just back yourself. And the other thing I would say is, in backing yourself, also realize that it's detached from the outcome. Right? There's a huge number of customers out there. The customer base is not finite. You have something of value to add. And if you go out there with an attitude, I'm going to be of service, and I'm going to be a person who can provide solutions to problems, but my core role is to try to articulate the problems better than my customer can, then you'll do okay. So when you have a conversation, if it doesn't end up in a sale, by all means, review that. But if it doesn't end up in a sale, then move on to the next thing with a learning they can apply to the next time you have a conversation, but also detach from the outcome of that one as well. Because if you do that more and more and more, you'll start to build a muscle, and the results will and it sounds a bit of a cliche, but the results do take care of themselves. It just happens.
Love it.
You just got to keep talking to people.
It's a contact sport. Love it.
It is.
So, mate, last thing is, what's one book or one habit or one mindset shift that has made the biggest difference for you and maybe the people you mentor?
It's a book that everybody's probably got this book, but it's the James Clear book, Atomic Habits. And
really?
Yeah, it's and there's probably a whole host. You can see the background here. I've got a bookshelf that's really untidy, but got a bucket load of books here. That really had an impact on me, because it's the small things that we do that over time add up to big results. And that's both in a positive sense and in a not so positive sense. So there's resourceful habits and unresourceful habits, such as you eat one Mars bar. It's all good. You have a Mars bar once a day for like 3 years, then it's going to have sort of an impact if you don't do some exercise to counteract that. So what that taught me, and I pass it on to sales teams and sales leaders, is what's the small things you can do each day. And it could be just the 5-minute preparation before a meeting that can set you up for success, to have a really good meeting, to have that customer or that potential customer leave that meeting with an impression of, hey, that was a different meeting. There's something about this person, or there's something about what they said that is inquisitive, that I want to have another meeting with them. I want to have another connection with them. It's the small things you do. So the Atomic Habits is the big one. So we focus on doing the big stuff. What he says is, if you focus on the small stuff and repeat those over time, it may not be sexy, but it will compound over time, as long as you identify what those small things are.
Very cool. Darren, we could carry on forever, as you've probably figured out, but we do have to call it a day. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I've enjoyed this immensely. How can people find you? How can people get in contact?
Thanks, Matthew. It's been a awesome conversation, mate. It's I can't believe it's 12 months since we last spoke. Best place is LinkedIn. So they can either use my name, Darren Mitchell, or look up Sales Leadership Coach, and that'll come up with my profile. And my website's on there as well, exceptionalsalesleader.com, and obviously the podcast, The Exceptional Sales Leader. There's links in there as well. But LinkedIn is probably the source of truth.
Perfect. You've got about 700 episodes of that podcast now, right? Is that right?
Well, I've literally yesterday uploaded episode 885, but full transparency, I've got about 25 in the can that I haven't uploaded yet. So we're over 900 at the moment.
Fantastic. Well, mate, I really enjoyed our conversation. Looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Awesome, mate. Thanks a lot. Good on you.